How's it going, everybody? My name's Poison Ducky, and we're back on the quick play grind, or experimentation, I should say. I'm playing as Hag Grief in this replay, and I'm actually really liking Hag Grief as a DLC, because I would say Malice Darkblade just feels so meaty, very powerful. He has 2 health bars, I don't know, he feels kind of like Archaon in terms of power levels, maybe Tyrion. Tyrion, Archaon kind of power levels of melee combatant, except actually I think Tyrion's a really good comparison because Tyrion almost has, with the Heart of Avalorn, he has 2 health bars essentially. But Malice Darkblade is a little bit more effective in large scale, like grouped combat, and he's still effective in single combat. So I really like bringing him into, like, he's an expensive lord though. I must say, he is very expensive for someone that doesn't bring any sort of magical options. He doesn't bring any lore of, like, fire, dark, or anything like that. So, yeah, he's good, but you definitely pay for him. Now let's get into some army introductions. I am fighting the vampire counts here, and it's very important to know that when I choose my army layout, and it's really weird, my balance of power is already in their favor. It happens every game, I swear. But I do have a front line of bleak swords and dread spears because I am expecting some sort of cavalry play. Vampire counts almost always use some powerful cavalry like the Blood Knights or some large units like Vargulfs. But what I didn't expect is that just recently vampires did get a buff for the Graveguard. So Graveguard are actually should be much more common if they are reading the patch notes, but you never know. Another thing I always expect in a vampire count build is chaff. So Black Ark Corsairs are very, very good at taking down zombies, skeletons. They have high weapon strength is not the highest, but they have bonus versus infantry and good melee attack along with armor. So skeletons, zombies can't really do too much to them. And of course, just in case my opponent's army went full Graveguard rush build, I did have 1 unit of Hargoneth Executioners. Now, 1 unit won't be enough to take on multiple units of Graveguard with great weapons, but I'm not expecting great weapon Graveguard. So 1 unit in itself should be able to kill lots of Graveguard. Unless he brings a lot of Graveguard with great weapons, which I really don't expect at all. That would be quite the counterplay by my opponent. 2 units of Dark Shards without shields because vampire counts do not have projectiles that I should really care about. A unit of Witch Elves to berserk my enemies just in case they get into the crossbow backline. And if you notice very closely, well, not so closely, you can see that my Dark Shards are in a very boxy formation. That makes it so that they can turn easier when firing at targets that move left to right. Makes it a lot better for firing at cavalry, but makes it a lot more susceptible to AoE magic. So you always have to keep this in mind. I do not like boxy formations except for units like Dark Shards or Archers, and in that case it's okay. I like it with Dark Shards because they're low rate of fire though, specifically Dark Shards. And of course a Dread Spear to defend them in the back. I am bringing the Lore of Fire because Lore of Fire is really good against the vampire counts, it turns out. And of course I have to bring some great DLC units. I am bringing a Blood Rack Medusa anti-infantry power. Now, after using this, I did compare this earlier to a Ancient Salamander, but this is a much more specialized Ancient Salamander, I would suppose. More anti-infantry power and no arc to the projectiles. You have to have a pretty much clear line of sight to deal the damage that you need. And of course, doing some harassing damage is going to be the Regiment of Renowned Ravagers of Rakarth, Scourge Runner Chariot. Now these have poison projectiles, which can be very useful when someone's trying to chase down these chariots, which is going to happen a lot. The ability to poison your opponent just makes it so it's nearly impossible to catch these things unless you have some sort of hound unit. And even then, that's a lot of speed taken off. Like, these Scourge Runner Chariots look slow, they look bulky, right? But they have 84 speed. But they trade off is that they actually don't do that much damage to infantry, only a 50 charge bonus, and their weapon strength is kind of low. But let's start this replay. Now my opponent does bring a plethora of skeletons. He does bring some Graveguard, but the biggest component of his army is the Blood Knights and Vlad von Karstein himself. He has a lot of money spent. Now my chariots are going to give a little bit of a strafe run and actually deal no model damage to these skeletons. 120 out of 120. Like as the more and more I use the Scourge Runner chariots, I realize this is much more focused on the projectiles than the actual like melee damage. So getting a little bit of HP damage at the beginning, not really worth it. But getting the projectiles into Blood Knights, absolutely worth it. Now, I moved my Blood Rack Medusa up because it has 58 speed and is going to get some good shots into the enemy Graveguard. 8 models down already, but it's very, very effective against infantry, I see. But the Blood Rack Medusa has some microing problems. I need a... it's definitely a strange unit to use in this kind of circumstance, because if there's any front line, you essentially have to flank around. But the Medusa definitely has the speed to match. Now, the frontline engagement is going to start, and I do see Graveguard combined with skeletons and zombies. Now, the skeletons will be dealt with very easily by Bleak Swords and Black Arc Corsairs. There's going to be, and even, I believe the the Graveguard he did bring do not have great weapons. So if they fight my Black Arc Corsairs, it will most definitely take a while, as Black Arc Corsairs have high armor. Now, I'm using my Witch Elves here to screen the Blood Knights as I fire at them with my crossbows. They turn quickly, and that makes it a lot easier to get some really good crossbow fire. And I've already taken out a quarter of that Blood Knight HP, which will be healed up because its vampire counts. The battle in the middle, I do get a flank in the center with Black Arc Corsairs. It's already a pretty good engagement. The Sternsmen, though, are a very tough cookie to crack. So Bleak Swords on one side, Black Arc Corsairs on the other. They'll deal with the Skeleton Spearmen, no problem, but the high armor of the Sternsmen will take a while to churn down. But the Harganeth Executioners are here. They are dealing with zombies, which is a mistake for me. You do not want Harganeth Executioners really dealing with that. And I completely destroyed the left flank incursion here with the combination of Malice Darkblade, the Black Arc Corsairs, and some Dread Spears. Now my opponent does push up a Corpse Cart with Unholy Lodestone, and yeah, as you can see, that's really not the play. Malice Darkblade will destroy anything single target that's not either a giant, a dragon, or like a very powerful lord. Now my opponent does something very good here, and he gets into the back line of my Dark Shards along with some very cheap units, but units that will tie up and deal damage regardless of what because Dark Shards are not good in melee. So he's going to charge in the Dire Pack and the Blood Knights into my Witch Elves, which is an interesting play because now the Blood Knights are going to rampage. He is piling on here in the back line. Now, with this, I bring back my one left flank, and I move my units back towards the defend of my Dark Shards. I lose one unit to routing, but a nice Burning Head sweeping through these low-tier chaff units, and because they're rampaging, they really cannot leave, and that's some massive damage at this point. Now, over here on the right flank, my Black Arc Corsairs are losing miserably as they are outnumbered, like, essentially 4-1 with zombies and Graveguard, actually, overwhelming their forces. But it's been taking a while. It is 4 minutes into the match, and they're just about to rout, and that's because of the armor. And I really like the Corsairs in this matchup. In other matchups, maybe Beastmen, I would bring them, but in this one in particular, I just think they're good. Beastmen, Vampire Counts, Black Arc Corsairs. Not many other matchups I would bring them, though. Now, good old Malice Darkblade, he is taking a beating against Vlad von Karstein. In fact, so much so, he's almost below half health, and what that really means is that he has 1.5 bars of health left because of his special ability. I am using his abilities to debuff enemy units and buff himself, but really strangely enough, Malice Darkblade, all of his abilities actually hurt him. So it really plays into the flavor of him being like this self-destructive lord that has to really turn into Zarkin to get the full effectiveness. Now, yeah, he's using one of his AoE abilities here. It's reducing melee defense and leadership. Now, the leadership doesn't really affect vampire counts. The only difference here is that they will start crumbling a little bit faster. But you'll see here, I actually get routed. Malice gets routed, and a very important note of information here, he cannot turn into Zarkin while routed, so once he turns into Zarkin, he becomes unbreakable, which is great and everything. He'll die to the very last breath. But if your opponent actually, I believe the counterplay is routing the opponent before he can turn into Zarkin, you've lost so much value in this kind of trade. Now the balance of power is more in line of my side finally, because I believe the counter picks of my unit choice has been quite fantastic, and I've run out of ammo with the Ravagers of Rakarth. He's trying to pinpoint down my Bloodrack Medusa, but it's just a little tough because it's the 58 speed. I haven't been using it very effectively. I tried to shoot the Blood Knights with my Bloodrack Medusa. Turns out Medusas are really only good against infantry, which is an interesting play at this point. But looking at this, it's pretty much clean up. The only thing left, I'm going to spend a little fireball to attempt to hit Vlad von Karstein, but Vlad von Karstein has like, what, 90% damage resistance when he has the ring? And beating him down is going to be a nightmare, to say the least. He alone can kill entire armies. If only he wasn't affected by leadership problems, if he was unbreakable or something like that, that would be completely insane. Now, I do have Malice Darkblade back into the field. He did stop himself from routing. My opponent did not chase him off the battlefield, and in turn, I turn him into Zarkan, which means he will be taking a damage over time. Even if he does nothing, he'll be taking a little tick of damage every, like, what, I think maybe 10-15 seconds. But that does mean his combat stats are very much increased. He has 96 melee attack with no buffs, might I say. His weapon strength is increased, his charge bonus is increased. He becomes a monster once he turns. And he has new abilities such as the Suck, the Reaper of Souls, to heal off. And he has abilities to explode, and it won't damage friendly units. Now, I do bring him into Vlad von Karstein damage range, but it turns out Vlad von Karstein, even when Zarkin is on his Zarkin mode, his demonic form, his edgy white hair mode, Vlad von Karstein has the power to just still beat him. Vlad von Karstein is just he is a powerhouse. And that's why he's so expensive, though. And my opponent's army was a little bit on the cheaper side. If you bring Vlad von Karstein, you're going to have to pay in other areas. Now the combat's going quite nice. The Banshee choice was also quite great on my opponent's side because really good at sniping my lords. But he hasn't actually been able to touch... the Banshee hasn't at least been able to touch my lord. It's really only been Vlad, and Vlad alone just has the power. Now, the only units left are Vlad and the Banshee, and it's just going to be a meat fest of grinding and grinding and grinding as we smack him over and over again. But yeah, like we've been smacking him for like a good few minutes, and he is just at like 70%. So let's speed this up a little bit. As I go back and forth, hitting him, shooting some crossbows, and moving. The mass of Vlad is a little bit higher than other single target units, at least that's what it feels like. I'm going to use the Reaper of Souls, make sure he goes, and right at last second, it will be a win. Right before Zarkin dies, actually. He had like 200 hit points. But that was a fun replay. And I really enjoy the new Dark Elf DLC units. So let's look at our unit stats right here. We got 60 kills on Malice, 142 on the Sorcerer, but that's all from the Burning Head, essentially. Dark Spears, 95, 91 kills. That's something you don't expect because Dread Spears, like, have no melee attack. All they do is sit there and just not die. That's essentially their role. And they did less damage than the Bleak Swords, funnily enough. But the Black Ark Corsairs, I think, were the pick to go because 132, 86, 87 kills. They're anti-infantry. They're almost like Forsaken. They're kind of like, what, the Depth Guard. They deal the damage. They just don't have the armor piercing. And against zombies and skeletons, you really don't need it. Witch Elves doing their job, rampaging the Blood Knights, making sure they don't get into my back line as effectively as they could. They still did make it into back line eventually, but they had to use a lot of resources to get there. Now, the Ravagers of Rakarth, the more I use them, I realize they're really actually not good in melee combat. They're so mediocre, in melee combat that you can actually take him down with a unit of hounds, something like the Dire Pack or like the Regiment of Renowned Hound unit for Norska. Really, that's all you need. Any flying unit as well, Harpies, Carrion. They're not very effective. Their projectiles are insane though. They're firing at Blood Knights, and Blood Knights got very little value there, only 35 kills, but you can tell by the chevrons they did get some value damage on either the Ravagers, or maybe they got some good charges into my infantry, my high tier infantry like my Harganeth. Harganeth, my goodness, 300 kills. They really shredded through Graveguard. They were essentially the only armor piercing that I had other than the Dark Shards, and that's really all I needed. Like, if you look at how much armor piercing I have Harganeth, Bloodrack, Medusa, Dark Shards, and the Scourge with Chariot, but this Chariot's only for large units, essentially. Wasting your ammo on infantry would not be worth it. Really great game overall. Good game to Acarus, bringing this buffed, kind of different vampire count build, especially with the buffed Graveguard. Now all we have to see is the... what's it called? The ghouls. I believe they buffed the ghouls in their crypt ghouls, and maybe the smaller ones? I'm not sure. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked my little return to Warhammer 2, and I'll catch you guys later.